The stars belonged to others. That was what every human child learned from the moment they could understand words. The galaxy had masters and humanity was not among them. Captain Jihoon stood on the bridge of the cargo ship Resilient Dawn, watching the massive hegemony warship pass by his small vessel. The alien ship was 3 kilometers long, covered in weapons that could turn a planet into dust. His ship carried grain and medicine to the colonies. The difference was clear. The hegemony ruled everything, and humans simply existed at their pleasure. It had been this way for 50 years. When humanity first traveled faster than light and reached the stars, they thought they would find new worlds to explore. Instead, they found the hegemony waiting. 4 ancient alien races controlled everything. They had ruled for 100,000 years. They had crushed every species that challenged them. They looked at humans and saw nothing special. The hegemony classified humanity as a Tier 3 servitor species. Humans could mine asteroids, grow food, and build simple things, but they could not have weapons. They could not expand beyond their 12 colony worlds. They could not even govern themselves without hegemony approval. Earth and all its colonies existed because the hegemony allowed it. Jihoon hated it. Every day he hauled cargo past hegemony warships and checkpoints. Every day he watched alien soldiers treat humans like children. But what could anyone do? The hegemony had weapons humans could not imagine. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had won every war for 100,000 years. Today was different, though. Jihoon received a distress signal from a refugee flotilla, small ships barely holding together, trying to escape hegemony space. The refugees were from a species called the Telvan. Their world had been destroyed because they refused to give the hegemony something they wanted. Now they just wanted to survive. Jihoon changed course to help them. It was the right thing to do. As his ship approached the refugee vessels, he saw them on his screens. Families, children, people who had lost everything. Then the hegemony arrived. Valtor ships, sleek and deadly. They surrounded the refugees. Jihoon opened communication channels and heard the Valtor commander speak. The words were cold and simple. These vessels are in violation of hegemony law. They will be eliminated. Jihoon watched in horror as the Valtor opened fire. The refugee ships had no shields, no weapons, no chance. They exploded in bright flashes. Hundreds of lives ended in seconds. Men, women, children, all gone. Jihoon tried to move closer to pick up any survivors. His crew begged him to save someone, anyone. But the Valtor turned their weapons toward the Resilient Dawn. A warning shot crossed his bow. The message was clear, leave or die with them. Jihoon ran. He had no choice. His cargo ship could not fight a warship. He jumped to faster-than-light speed and escaped. But he could not escape the images in his mind. The refugees dying, the hegemony killing them like they were nothing. When Jihoon returned to Earth, he went straight to the Human Colonial Authority. He found Yuna, one of the few human diplomats allowed to speak with the Hegemony Council. She was smart, careful, and dedicated to protecting humanity's interests. Jihoon told her everything he saw. Yuna listened with a hard expression. She had seen hegemony cruelty before, but never something this direct. She promised to bring it before the council. Jihoon did not think it would help, but he had to try. 3 days later, Yuna stood in the Hegemony Council chamber. The room was vast, designed to make smaller species feel insignificant. Representatives from all 4 hegemony powers sat on raised platforms looking down at her. She presented her evidence. She showed recordings of the refugee massacre. She demanded justice. The council chamber filled with laughter. Not polite disagreement, but actual laughter. The Valtor ambassador stood and looked at Yuna like she was an insect. Your species will learn its place, the ambassador said, or be removed from the board entirely. The refugees violated our law. We enforced our law. This is how the galaxy works. This is how it has always worked. Yuna returned to Earth in silence. The message was clear. Humanity had no voice, no rights, no power. They existed because the hegemony had not yet decided to erase them. But Yuna was not alone in her anger. Others had been waiting for this moment. Minho was one of them. He had been a military strategist for Earth's defense forces before the hegemony banned human military development. Now he worked in civilian logistics, but his mind never stopped planning. When Yuna told him what happened, he simply nodded. It is time, Minho said. For years, people like Minho had been preparing in secret. They knew the hegemony would never see humans as equals. They knew eventually humanity would have to choose, accept slavery forever or fight for freedom. The refugee massacre made the choice clear. Minho reached out to others across all human worlds. There was Hana, a physicist who had been developing technology the hegemony ignored as primitive. There was Taeyong, a shipbuilder working in the asteroid belts far from hegemony eyes. There was Sora, a computer expert who had been studying hegemony systems for years. They all gathered in secret, in a facility buried deep under the lunar surface. Minho showed them what he had been planning. Yuna showed them why it was necessary. Together they began to organize a resistance. The hegemony had studied human history. They read about Earth's wars, its violence, its tendency to destroy itself. They concluded that humans were violent primitives who would never unite, never pose a threat, never matter. The hegemony's mistake was thinking that human violence was weakness. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had developed weapons to kill millions. They had created strategies to defeat enemies with overwhelming advantages. They had survived nuclear weapons, biological warfare, and countless conflicts. They were very, very good at war. The hegemony never considered that humans might turn all that experience, all that violence, all that creativity outward. They never imagined that the species they dismissed as primitive might be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Yuna looked at the resistance members gathered in the lunar facility. She thought about the refugees dying in space. She thought about the hegemony's laughter. She thought about 50 years of humanity bowing to alien masters. Every empire in history claimed they would last forever, Yuna said quietly. Every single one was wrong. Maybe it is time to prove that again. The others nodded. The decision was made. Humanity would no longer accept its chains. The hegemony had ruled for 100,000 years. That reign was about to end. The resistance met in hidden places. Minho showed them what humanity had built in secret over the past 30 years. When the hegemony banned human military development, they thought they had disarmed a potential threat. They were wrong. Humans were very good at hiding weapons in plain sight. Taeyong brought images from the Saturn belt. What the hegemony thought were mining stations were actually shipyards. What looked like cargo haulers were actually warships with hidden weapons. Humanity had been building a fleet while pretending to follow the rules. We have 2,000 ships, Taeyong said. Not as big as hegemony warships, but faster. Much faster. The others stared at the numbers. 2,000 warships. The hegemony had tens of thousands across the galaxy, but they were spread thin, controlling hundreds of systems. 2,000 ships in the right place at the right time could do serious damage. Sora presented her work next. She had spent years studying hegemony computer systems and communications. The hegemony was arrogant. They ruled for so long that they stopped being careful. Their military communications were not even encrypted within what they called controlled space. They thought no one would dare spy on them. I can hear everything they say, Sora explained. Every order, every troop movement, every strategic discussion. They do not know we are listening. Hana stood up with her research. The hegemony had banned certain weapons as too primitive or too dishonorable. Nuclear weapons were considered barbaric. Kinetic weapons were too simple. Artificial intelligence in warfare was banned 10,000 years ago. The hegemony fought with energy shields, plasma weapons, and technology that took centuries to master. They think our technology is primitive, Hana said, but primitive does not mean ineffective. She showed them the weapons humanity had developed. Railguns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. The hegemony's energy shields were designed to stop energy weapons and plasma. They did not stop simple metal moving very fast. Nuclear weapons could be loaded into missiles too small and simple for hegemony sensors to detect as threats. And artificial intelligence could control thousands of drones at once, overwhelming defenses. They have been fighting the same way for 100,000 years, Hana continued. They have rules and honor codes and traditional tactics. We do not have to follow any of that. Wu Jin, the weapons developer, added more. Humanity had studied every hegemony battle in recorded history. The 4 alien races always used the same strategies. The Valter always attacked with overwhelming energy weapons. The Kryn used biological ships in tight formations. The Celestians relied on psychic warriors. The Morden used computer predictions to counter enemy moves before they happened. They are predictable, Wu Jin said. They have specialized so much that they cannot adapt. We have fought wars against ourselves for thousands of years. We change tactics every time. Minho stood and looked at everyone in the room. These were the people who would change human history. They were scientists, soldiers, engineers, and dreamers. They were about to start a war against an enemy that had crushed 1,000 rebellions. The hegemony believes their experience makes them invincible, Minho said. But experience can become a weakness. They fight the same battles over and over. They expect enemies to fight the same way every time. We will not give them what they expect. Yuna raised a concern. 2,000 ships against tens of thousands. Even with surprise and better tactics, the numbers are against us. If they unite their full military power against us, we will lose. Then we do not let them unite, Minho replied. We hit them everywhere at once. We attack supply lines, not battle fleets. We destroy their communications and logistics. We make them afraid to concentrate their forces because they will not know where we will strike next. It was guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. Humanity could not win a straight fight. So they would not fight fair. They would hit and run. They would use surprise and deception. They would make the hegemony bleed until the cost of fighting was too high. But there was still one question. Minji, the elected leader of Earth's government, had been listening to everything. She was the one who would have to give the final order. She was the one who would be responsible if this went wrong. If we do this, millions will die, Minji said quietly. Maybe billions. The hegemony will retaliate against our colonies. They will try to destroy Earth. We might lose everything. We have already lost everything that matters, Yuna replied. We live as slaves. Our children will live as slaves. Their children after them. The hegemony will never see us as equals. They will never give us freedom. We have to take it, Jihoon spoke up. He had started this by refusing to stay silent about the massacre. I watched them kill refugees for no reason. I watched them laugh when we asked for justice. If we do nothing, we accept that this is right. I would rather die fighting than live on my knees. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what was at stake. This was not a small rebellion that could be hidden if it failed. Once humanity struck, there was no going back. The hegemony would either fall or humanity would be erased from the galaxy. Minji took a long breath. She thought about Earth and its 12 colonies. She thought about the children growing up under alien rule. She thought about what history would say about this moment. Then she made her decision. Every empire in history claimed they would last forever, Minji said. The Romans, the Mongols, the British, all of them. Every single one fell. The hegemony thinks 100,000 years makes them permanent. Let us teach them the same lesson. She looked at Minho. Begin Operation Prometheus. Light the fire that burns down their empire. The resistance members scattered to their positions. Taeyong returned to the Saturn belt to prepare the fleet. Sora went to Earth's communication centers to coordinate the intelligence network. Hana and Wujin distributed weapons to hidden resistance cells across all human colonies. Jihoon returned to his ship, ready to lead the first attack. Minho stayed on the moon, coordinating everything. He looked at the star maps showing hegemony territory. 50 systems would be hit simultaneously. The hegemony would wake up to find their empire burning in 100 places. They would panic, divide their forces, and make mistakes. Yuna prepared the message that would be broadcast to the entire galaxy after the first attacks. Humanity needed allies. Other species had suffered under the hegemony for millennia. If they saw humans striking back successfully, some might join the fight. The preparations took 3 months. 3 months of secret movements, hidden weapons transfers, and careful planning. The hegemony noticed nothing. They were too confident, too certain of their power. They had crushed 1,000 rebellions before. Why would humans be different? On the day before the attack, Minho sent a final message to all resistance cells. It was simple. Tomorrow we show them that humans do not break. We show them that slavery is not destiny. We show them that their empire can fall. Be brave, be ruthless, be human. Across human space, thousands of people prepared for war. Pilots climbed into hidden warships. Soldiers checked their weapons. Hackers positioned themselves at computer terminals. Everyone knew their role. Everyone understood they might not survive, but they also understood something the hegemony had forgotten. Freedom was not something given by the powerful. It was something taken by the brave. And humanity had always been brave, even when being brave meant fighting impossible odds. The countdown began. In 24 hours, the galaxy would change forever. The attacks began at exactly the same moment across 50 star systems. Hegemony commanders woke to alarms and chaos. Supply convoys exploded. Communication stations went dark. Automated defense platforms turned their weapons on each other, their systems corrupted by human hackers. In the first hour, humanity destroyed more hegemony assets than had been lost in the previous 1,000 years. The hegemony had no warning, no preparation, and no idea what was happening. They had dismissed humans as harmless servants. Now those servants were killing them. Ji-hoon led the attack on Arcturus Station, a major hegemony supply hub. His fleet of 200 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Defending the station was a Kryn Dominion battle group, 50 biological warships, each grown over decades to be the perfect weapon. The Kryn commander received the alert about human ships and actually laughed. 50 Kryn bioships against 200 primitive human vessels. The battle would be over in minutes. The Kryn had been fighting for 100,000 years. What could humans possibly do? The Kryn ships moved into their traditional attack formation, a tight sphere that maximized their combined firepower and defensive capabilities. It was a formation that had won 10,000 battles. The Kryn commander expected the humans to panic and scatter. Instead, Ji-hoon's fleet did scatter, but not in panic. They split into 20 groups of 10 ships each, moving in different directions. The Kryn commander frowned. This was inefficient. Divided forces were weak forces. The humans were making basic tactical mistakes. The Kryn ships pursued the closest human group. The bioships were fast and powerful. They would catch the humans and destroy them one group at a time. Simple and effective. That was when the trap closed. The human ships led the Kryn into the debris field around Arcturus Station. Old satellites, destroyed ships, and chunks of metal floated everywhere. The Kryn ships had to slow down to avoid collisions. Their tight formation broke apart. Ji-hoon gave the signal. Hidden among the debris were thousands of mines, placed there by human infiltrators over the past month. The mines were nuclear-tipped, primitive by hegemony standards, too simple for their sensors to classify as weapons. They exploded all at once. 12 Kryn bioships died instantly. The others scattered in confusion. That was when the human ships attacked from above and below the debris field. Railguns fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. The Kryn bioships had shields designed to stop energy weapons. Metal slugs passed right through. The Kryn commander tried to regroup his forces, but the humans kept moving, never staying in one place. They fired from unexpected angles, used the debris as cover, and disappeared before the Kryn could return fire. And then came the drones. Thousands of small automated ships swarmed the Kryn vessels. Individually, each drone was harmless. Together, they overwhelmed the bioship's point defenses. While the Kryn ships were distracted, the human warships hit them with concentrated railgun fire. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, 38 Kryn bioships were destroyed. The remaining 12 retreated in panic. Ji-hoon lost 12 ships, but his fleet was intact and victorious. He sent a message to Minho. First blood is ours. Across the galaxy, similar battles unfolded. Human forces hit hegemony positions and then vanished before reinforcements arrived. They did not try to hold territory. They destroyed what they could and moved to the next target. The hegemony was used to fighting enemies who stood and fought. Humans did not stand still. Nari, leading humanity's psychological warfare division, began broadcasting messages across all hegemony communication channels. The broadcasts showed human history. Nuclear weapons destroying cities. Trench warfare where millions died. Tank battles across entire continents. Humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing other humans. If we did this to ourselves, the broadcast said, imagine what we will do to you. The hegemony species watched these broadcasts with growing horror. They saw a species that had survived total wars, that had built weapons capable of destroying their own planet, that had fought thousands of conflicts and somehow never destroyed themselves completely. This was not a primitive species. This was a species that had been preparing for war since they first discovered fire. The Valter sovereignty, who had laughed at Yuna in the council chamber, called an emergency session. They demanded immediate military action against humanity. Earth must be destroyed as an example. The human colonies must be wiped out. This rebellion must end quickly before other species got similar ideas. But the other hegemony powers hesitated. The Kryn were reeling from their losses. The Celestians were dealing with attacks on their psychic training facilities. The Morden could not predict human tactics because humans had no consistent pattern. Their quantum computers kept giving different answers. The humans are not fighting like a typical rebellion, a Morden analyst reported. They have no central fleet for us to destroy, no capital world to capture besides Earth. They strike everywhere and nowhere. Our predictive models cannot account for such chaos. The hegemony powers argued among themselves. The Valtur wanted immediate retaliation. The Kryn wanted time to grow new bioships. The Celestians wanted to study human psychology first. The Morden wanted more data before committing forces. They had ruled together for 100,000 years, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. While the hegemony argued, humans kept attacking. Supply lines were destroyed. Communication relays were hacked. Isolated outposts fell silent. And always, the human ships vanished before hegemony reinforcements arrived. Minho watched the reports from his command center under the lunar surface. Everything was going according to plan. The hegemony was confused, divided, and reactive. They kept sending forces to places humans had already left. They were fighting the last battle, not the next one. But Minho knew this phase would not last. Eventually, the hegemony would stop arguing and start adapting. They had not ruled for 100,000 years by being stupid. They would gather their forces and strike back hard. The real test was still coming. He was right. 2 weeks after the first human attacks, the hegemony convened a full war council. All four powers agreed to set aside their differences and work together. They assembled the Grand Armada, 10,000 warships, the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. Their target was clear. They would go to the Sol system and destroy Earth. The humans think they can hide and strike from the shadows, the Valtur commander announced. We will burn their homeworld and see how brave they are when their families are ashes. The Grand Armada began gathering at the Sirius staging point, only 8 light-years from Earth. Every day more ships arrived. The hegemony was done playing games. They would crush humanity completely and make an example that would terrify the galaxy for another 100,000 years. Sora detected the Armada's assembly and reported to Minho. The numbers were terrifying. 10,000 warships against humanity's remaining 1,900 ships. Even with better tactics, even with surprise, those odds were impossible. Minho looked at the tactical display showing the growing armada. Then he smiled. They are doing exactly what we predicted. They are not adapting. They are just using more of what failed before. Yuna asked the obvious question. Can we defend Earth against 10,000 ships? No, Minho said honestly. We cannot defend Earth with our fleet, so we will not try. He pulled up a different tactical display. It showed the Sol system with thousands of marked points. Yuna realized what she was looking at, and her eyes went wide. We are not going to fight them in space, Minho explained. We are going to turn our entire solar system into a weapon, and we are going to let them come to us. The Grand Armada finished assembling. 10,000 ships prepared to jump to the Sol system. The hegemony commanders were confident. This would be the end of the human rebellion. Earth would burn, and the natural order would be restored. They had no idea they were flying into the most elaborate trap in military history. The Grand Armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system in a display of overwhelming power. 10,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They had come to end humanity's rebellion with one decisive strike. Earth's orbital defenses looked pathetic in comparison. 12 defense platforms orbited the planet, weapons powered up but hopelessly outnumbered. The hegemony fleet was almost 1,000 times larger. The battle should be over before it began. The hegemony commander opened a communication channel to Earth. Surrender within 1 hour or face complete extinction. Your resistance ends today. Hyun, commanding Earth's defense, sat in the primary defense station. Around him, hundreds of men and women monitored their systems. They knew what was coming. They had prepared for this moment for months. Hyun activated his communication and sent a simple reply. "Come and take it." The hegemony commander closed the channel and gave the order to attack. 10,000 ships began moving toward Earth, expecting humanity's defenses to collapse immediately. The 12 defense platforms opened fire, their weapons flashing in the darkness. A few hegemony ships took damage, but it was nothing significant. The platforms were doomed. What the hegemony did not know was that the defense platforms were decoys. The real defense fleet was hiding in the Oort cloud at the very edge of the solar system. 800 human warships waited in silence, their power signatures hidden by the massive ice chunks floating around them. They watched as the Grand Armada moved deeper into the Sol system. The hegemony fleet passed Mars, then the asteroid belt. They were approaching Earth with no sign of serious resistance. The hegemony commanders were almost disappointed. Where were the hidden fleets? Where were the secret weapons? This was too easy. That was when Yuna activated the Sol system defense network. Over the past 3 years, humanity had hidden weapons throughout their solar system. Not energy weapons or missiles, but something much simpler. Rocks. Thousands of asteroids had been fitted with simple propulsion systems and aimed at pre-calculated trajectories. When Una gave the signal, these asteroids accelerated to incredible speeds. Some were small, the size of cars. Others were massive, the size of buildings. All of them moved at relativistic speeds, fast enough that their kinetic energy was devastating. The first wave hit the hegemony fleet with no warning. A rock the size of a bus moving at 1/10 the speed of light struck a Valtour warship. The ship did not just explode. It vaporized. Its shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did nothing against simple mass and velocity. More rocks followed. Hundreds of them, striking from multiple angles. The hegemony fleet's formation broke apart as ships tried to avoid the kinetic bombardment. Some succeeded. Many did not. Ships exploded or were damaged beyond repair. The primitive defense was killing them. While the hegemony fleet was in chaos, Doyen launched his cyber attack. Over the past weeks, Sora's team had infiltrated hegemony communication systems. They had planted corrupted code, waiting for the right moment. Now Doyen activated it. Hegemony ships began receiving false orders. Some were told to fire on specific coordinates that turned out to be friendly vessels. Others received navigation data that sent them into collision courses. The hegemony's advanced computers, which had never needed strong security because who would dare hack them, were turned into weapons against their own fleet. Commanders screamed orders trying to regain control, but their communication systems were compromised. Messages went to the wrong ships. Orders were delayed or changed. The perfect formation of the Grand Armada became a confused mess. That was when the human fleet struck. 800 ships emerged from the Oort cloud and accelerated toward the battle. They did not engage the hegemony fleet directly. Instead, they positioned themselves to herd the hegemony ships into specific zones. Zones where more kinetic weapons waited. The hegemony tried to form defensive positions, but the human ships moved too quickly. They fired railguns from long range, forcing hegemony ships to maneuver into the kill zones. More asteroids struck home. More ships died. On Earth's surface, millions of civilians revealed themselves as reserve military units. The hegemony had checked Earth's military capacity and found only small police forces. They never suspected that millions of humans had military training hidden in their backgrounds. Launch facilities opened across the planet. Strike craft and surface-to-orbit missiles added to the chaos in space. The battle lasted 6 days. It was not a clean victory. Humanity lost 340 ships. Cities on Earth were damaged when some hegemony weapons got through. But the Grand Armada, the mightiest military force ever assembled, was destroyed. Only 2,200 hegemony ships survived. They retreated in complete disorder, running for their lives. The galaxy watched in shock. The hegemony, rulers for 100,000 years, had been defeated by a species they considered primitive servants. The images spread across every communication network. Burning hegemony ships, human fighters pursuing fleeing enemies. The mighty brought low, but victory came with a terrible cost. The Celestian Imperium, in their desperation, had landed psychic warriors on Earth's surface. These warriors could control minds, break wills, and kill with thoughts. They struck civilian centers, causing mass casualties before they could be stopped. Suman, one of the resistance leaders, died defending a shelter full of children. She fought the Celestian warriors with nothing but a rifle and determination. She killed 3 of them before they overwhelmed her mind. Her last thoughts were pride that the children escaped. Millions of humans died in the 6-day battle. Cities were scarred, families destroyed. The victory was real, but it was paid for in blood and grief. Every survivor knew someone who had died defending Earth. Minho stood in the command center looking at the casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. He had known people would die. He had accepted that. But seeing the actual names, the actual losses, made it real in a way that plans and projections never could. Yuna found him there, staring at the screens. She put a hand on his shoulder. "We won," she said quietly. "At what cost?" Minho replied. "The cost of freedom," Yuna said. "The same cost every free people has paid throughout history. It hurts, it will always hurt. But look," she pointed to another screen showing broadcasts from across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved by the hegemony were rising up. The Telvan, the same species whose refugees Jehun had watched die, were fighting for their homeworld. The Gantha, who had been servants for 50,000 years, were seizing hegemony ships and declaring independence. "We did not just defeat them," Yuna continued. "We showed everyone that they could be defeated. The hegemony's power was always based on fear and the belief that they were invincible. We broke that belief. Now the whole galaxy sees the truth." She prepared her broadcast to the galaxy, the message that would change everything. She stood before the cameras, exhausted and grieving but unbroken, and spoke words that would echo through history. "The age of empires is over," Yuna said. "For 100,000 years the hegemony told us they were eternal, that their rule was the natural order of things. They were wrong. Every empire falls. Every tyrant ends. Today humanity proved that once again. But we did not win alone. We won because we refused to accept slavery. We won because we were willing to pay the price for freedom. And that price is always high." She looked directly into the camera. "To every species watching this, you do not need to wait for someone to save you. You do not need permission to be free. You just need courage. Stand up, fight back. The hegemony is not invincible. We proved that. Now prove it again. Take back your worlds. Take back your future. The age of freedom begins today." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy it was received in silence, then in celebration, then in revolution. The hegemony had survived for 100,000 years. That survival ended when they underestimated humanity. Now their empire was burning and there was no force strong enough to stop the fire. The defeat of the Grand Armada shattered more than ships. It shattered the idea that the hegemony could not be beaten. Within days, rebellions exploded across 1,000 worlds. Species that had served the hegemony for millennia suddenly remembered what freedom meant. The hegemony tried to respond, but they were stretched impossibly thin. Their military forces, already weakened by losses at Earth, could not be everywhere at once. Every time they crushed one rebellion, 3 more started. The empire that had seemed eternal was collapsing. The 4 hegemony powers began to fracture. Each blamed the others for the defeat at Earth. The Valtor said the Kryn bioships were weak. The Kryn said the Celestian psychic warriors failed. The Celestians blamed the Morden's flawed predictions. The Morden blamed everyone for not following their strategies. They had ruled together for 100,000 years, but now old rivalries resurfaced. On Earth, the human resistance leaders faced a crucial decision. Minho argued for total war. "We push until every hegemony world surrenders. We have the advantage now. We cannot give them time to recover." Yuna disagreed. "If we become conquerors, we become what we fought against. We killed millions to free ourselves. How many more will die if we try to rule others?" Jehun, now promoted to admiral, added his voice. "The point was never to rule the galaxy. The point was to make sure no one could rule it the way the hegemony did. We need to offer a different path." They debated for hours. The military leaders wanted to press the advantage. The political leaders wanted to avoid becoming another empire. Finally, they reached a compromise. Humanity would not conquer, but they would help others fight for freedom. Operation Libertas began 3 months after the Battle of Earth. Human fleets spread across the galaxy, but not to occupy worlds. They supported independence movements. They provided weapons, training, and tactical advice. Most importantly, they fought alongside species trying to free themselves. The Telvan were the first. Their homeworld had been destroyed, but they still had populations on a dozen colony worlds under hegemony control. Jihoon led a fleet to support their uprising. The Telvan fighters were brave but inexperienced. Human advisors taught them tactics. Human ships provided fire support. Together, they liberated 6 worlds in 2 months. Similar operations happened across hegemony space. The Gantha freed their homeworld with human assistance. The Pelvan threw off their chains with human weapons. The Dostran used human cyber warfare techniques to shut down hegemony control systems. Each victory encouraged more rebellions. The hegemony's response was predictable and brutal. They sent their remaining forces to make examples of rebel worlds. The Kryn Dominion tried to reconquer Telvan space. The bioships were still formidable, and they fought with desperate fury. The Telvan called for help. Human ships arrived within days. This time, the battle was different. The Kryn had studied human tactics and adapted. They no longer used tight formations. They spread out and used unpredictable maneuvers. The battle was hard fought, but humans adapted faster. They always adapted faster. Jihoon split his fleet into small hunter groups that tracked individual Kryn ships. The bioships were powerful, but they needed time to regenerate between battles. Human ships did not. They pressed the attack until the Kryn had no time to recover. After a month of constant fighting, the Kryn withdrew from Telvan space. They would never return. The Celestian Imperium made a final desperate gamble. They sent their entire remaining force to Earth, hoping to destroy humanity's leadership and break the rebellion. They landed psychic warriors on the surface by the thousands. Cities became battlegrounds as humans fought enemies who could control minds and crush wills. Humanity discovered something important during this battle. Psychic powers required concentration and line of sight. Artillery and airstrikes worked perfectly well against psychic warriors. So did snipers shooting from long distances. The Celestians were dangerous, but they were not invincible. Sumin had died fighting them, but her sacrifice taught valuable lessons. Human soldiers learned to fight without looking at their enemies directly. They used mirrors and cameras. They worked in small groups where one person observed while others fired. They adapted. The battle for Earth lasted 3 weeks. When it ended, the Celestian invasion force was destroyed. The Celestian Imperium, already reeling from rebellions in their territory, collapsed into civil war. Their subject species turned their psychic abilities against the ruling caste. The empire that had ruled through fear of mental domination fell to its own weapons. The Valtur sovereignty tried one last offensive. They gathered their remaining fleets and struck at human colony worlds, hoping to force humanity to pull back from supporting rebellions. They hit the colonies at New Terra and Harmony Station, killing millions of civilians. The attack had the opposite effect. Humanity stopped being cautious. Every human fleet in the galaxy converged on Valtur space. They were done being careful. The Valtur had killed civilians deliberately. Now humanity would show them what happened when you made humans truly angry. The campaign lasted 6 months. Human fleets, supported by dozens of newly freed species, tore through Valtur territory. The Valtur's energy weapons and dimensional warfare meant nothing against enemies who fought with rage and determination. Their worlds fell one by one. When human forces reached the Valtur homeworld, they broadcast a simple message. You killed our families. You thought that would weaken us. You were wrong. Surrender now or your homeworld becomes a monument to your mistake. The Valtur surrendered. Their sovereignty ended not with defiance, but with the realization that they had awakened something that would not stop until they were completely defeated. The Morden hierarchy stood alone. Their quantum computers had predicted every possibility, calculated every outcome. Every calculation showed the same result. They would lose. So they made one final stand at their homeworld, hoping their predictive technology would give them enough advantage to win. Minho led the assault personally. He was old now, tired from years of war, but he wanted to be there when the last hegemony power fell. The Morden fought brilliantly. Their computers predicted human tactics and countered them perfectly. For a week, the battle was deadlocked. Then Minho did something no computer could predict. He surrendered his flagship. He broadcast a message saying humanity was pulling back. The Morden computers analyzed this and concluded it was a victory. They stopped their defensive operations and began celebrating. That was when the real attack began. Minho had not surrendered. He had lied. The Morden computers could predict tactics and strategies, but they could not predict when someone would simply ignore all rational behavior and do something unexpected. The human fleet struck while the Morden were celebrating their predicted victory. The Morden homeworld fell in 3 hours. Their last transmission was a simple statement. Calculation error. Unknown variable recalculating. They never finished the calculation. The hegemony was gone. 4 empires that had ruled for 100,000 years, all fallen within 3 years of humanity's first strike. The galaxy was free, but also in chaos. Thousands of species were independent now, but many had no experience governing themselves. Humanity helped establish the Free Species Concordat. It was not a government. It was a mutual defense agreement. Any species could join. All members were equal. If one was attacked, all would defend them. Most importantly, no member could conquer another. The age of empires was truly over. 10 years after the Battle of Earth, Una stood before a memorial on Earth. It listed the names of every human who died in the war. Millions of names. Among them was Minho, who had died in the final battle for the Morden homeworld. Beside her stood Jihoon, retired now and gray-haired. A young cadet approached them. How did we win? They had 100,000 years to prepare. We had less than 100, Una smiled. They had 100,000 years to forget what it means to struggle. We never forgot. We spent our entire history fighting, adapting, surviving. When they encountered us, they saw primitives. But we were survivors. That is more dangerous than they ever imagined. She looked at the memorial, at Suman's name, at Minho's name, at millions of others. Every empire believes it will last forever. They all believe their power made them invincible. But empires are built by people, and people can always be defeated by others who refuse to give up. The cadet nodded, trying to understand. Jihoon put a hand on the young person's shoulder. The hegemony ruled for 100,000 years. That is longer than human civilization had existed when we first encountered them. But time does not equal invincibility. It just means they had more time to become rigid, predictable, and arrogant. We were flexible, unpredictable, and desperate. Desperation beat arrogance. Una added one final thought. They claimed invincibility. We wrote their end. Not because we were stronger, but because we refused to accept that anyone had the right to rule us. That is what made the difference. That is what will always make the difference. In orbit above Earth, the resilient Dawn floated as a museum ship, the same vessel that Jihoon had commanded when he witnessed the refugee massacre. It broadcast a continuous message to the entire galaxy, a warning and a promise.